Hello and welcome to another course from devtechie.com, and in this video course we are going to be building devtechie's tasks app, and this app is going to be built using UIKit. Now you heard it, not SwiftUI, UIKit, and we're going to basically use MVVM design pattern to build this app. Now the persistence layer for this app is going to be CoreData. So you're going to be learning how to use CoreData within your apps, and we're going to be combining Lottie animation to celebrate the completion of tasks. And basically you'll see how you can inject external dependencies into your project. Now, one thing I want to call out is this app is built complete programmatic, meaning there is no use of storyboard in this course. Basically, we're going to build an app that is reflecting the real production environment, essentially in the tech companies that you might be targeting or working at. So most of the companies, they have gotten rid of the storyboards, and storyboards is no longer the way to create UI, but programmatic UI is the way to go in case of UIKit. Well, SwiftUI actually is completely programmatic, so that's why it doesn't apply. That statement doesn't apply there. But coming back to the UIKit, it makes it super easy when you build your UI programmatic, because you have a little bit more control. And other than using it at a production level, there is another benefit. So if you're learning iOS development, learning programmatic UI will give you a more insight into how things work, rather than like laying out stuff on the storyboard. Okay, so for that reason, we are going to be building this entire app in with programmatic UI, and we're going to basically once again build this entire app following MVVM design pattern. We're going to have CoreData. We're going to include CoreData as a separate component, so you can see how the CoreData initialization and management goes. So we're going to create a separate layer for that, and then we're going to start building out our individual component that would support this app, or basically build this app together. We're going to see how we can use Lottie animation in order to celebrate basically completion of a task, which is a representation of how you can include external dependencies using Swift Package Manager and then use them inside your app. Okay. All right. With that quick intro, let me go ahead and give you a walkthrough of what we are going to be building, and then we're going to jump right in. Okay, so this is the app, and what we have here is a main view, which is our home view, and this is going to be a table view with two different types of cells. First cell is going to show the summary of tasks. So for example, right now we have 3 things to do. That's what this states here, and we have not completed any of these. And this cell is going to be updated whenever we actually make changes on the other cells that are down here in the below, which actually include the details of the things that we want to do with a due date on it and a status, whether it is complete or not. Now, you are going to be building swipe gesture, and swiping from left to right will show you a way to change your status, complete status. So let's go ahead and mark this task as this task as complete. Okay, and we play a quick Lottie animation. Now this swipe gesture is conditional, so now this task has been marked completed. If we swipe again, we're going to see that the task now can be toggled to not completed, and we can just finish the swipe to change that status. Okay, so that's one. The other thing that you can do is you can actually delete an item from the list by swiping right to left. So you're gonna have like, both swipe gestures included in this, both sides. Okay. And then let me show you, like, so you've already seen what happens when you mark a task complete. So let's go ahead and mark this task complete. And as you can see here, our to do is now reduced to 2 from 3, and completed is marked as 1. Let's go ahead and mark all of them. So we have this guy updating now. We have, like, 1 to do and 2 completed. Let's mark the last one, and we have 0 to do's and 3 completed tasks. Now let's go ahead and add another task, and this one is gonna be a new task. So let's say I'm gonna say record UIKit course for devtechie.com. Okay, and let's mark it as a due date for May 5th. All right, I'm gonna save this now, and you will see that our task is added. Now these tasks are sorted by the due date. But there's one difference that I want to show you is whenever you have task that is not completed, in that case, you're going to see a due on date. And whenever task is marked as completed, then the due on actually disappears, and basically what you get is completed on, and it has the date on which the task was completed. Okay, so basically you are showing some conditional views using this technique that we're gonna learn. So you're gonna see how you can change the information based on the information that is available in your hand to show it to your user, where in a smaller space you're still making maximum use of the real estate. Okay. All right, so this is going to be the app that we are going to be working. Once again, we're going to build this using UIKit. Persistence layer is going to be CoreData. We're going to use Lottie animation to play some animations in Swift Package Manager to include that external dependency. We're going to use table views to display the list of items, and we're going to have custom cells in the table view to represent different kind of activities. For example, summary row and your individual task row. And then you're going to have conditional swipe gestures, which are going to be which are going to change their state based on their current state. And you're going to have swipe left and swipe right, swipe left and swipe right gestures available, supported within your app. You'll be able to add new tasks and basically persist them into the CoreData store. All right. With that, this is the complete walkthrough and intro for the course. Let's go ahead and hop into the course, and we will learn this whole app by building it from scratch. I'll see you guys inside the course. Thank you. Hello and welcome back. And in this video, we're going to start by creating our new project. So let's go ahead and get started. So I actually started creating a new project by going into File, New, and clicking on the project. Okay, so once you click on the new project, you're going to land on the screen, and we're going to select iOS and select the app template under applications. Then we're going to click next and basically give our product a name. Now we're going to give this one Tasks UIKit. And this project is based on UIKit, as the name suggests. We want to make sure that the interface that we choose is Storyboard and not Swift UI. Okay. We're going to leave the use CoreData unchecked because we're going to come back and basically add CoreData on our own. And the reason is, let's imagine you have a project that's already created and you want to add support for CoreData. Well, what are the things that you have to do in order to set up a CoreData successfully? And those things are not gonna basically be listed if you actually create this, because what's gonna happen is if you check this box, then Xcode will do all the setup for you, and you're gonna basically lose the flexibility of being able to choose your own name or define the initialization however you want to. So for that reason and for learning purposes, I would always recommend using or adding CoreData while you're learning, adding CoreData separately. Okay, and that's what we are going to do in this project. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to leave this checked off and clicking on next. Xcode is going to ask you to basically store this project somewhere, or the location where all the files are going to be stored, and that is somewhere in your MacBook. So just go ahead and pick a location, and I'm gonna pause the video and resume basically, so we both land wherever Xcode takes us after the project is created, and you'll see what it is. Okay, so I'm going to pause the video and create the project. Alright, so once you choose the location where you want to save the project, you're going to end up on this screen. Okay, and let's go ahead and talk about this. So basically what you're seeing right now is all the target related settings. So you can have multiple targets in your app. For example, your watch extension is a target, your widget extension is a target. So all these different targets will appear here once you start adding them. Okay, so then you have your target and its related settings, and then you have your project, your overall project basically that contains all the other targets. So basically all the project related settings are here, and this is where you define your minimum deployment target, basically saying that this is the minimum version of iOS my app needs in order for it to work properly. Okay, and you can choose to change it to something else. We're gonna leave it 16.4. Okay, all right. So going back, let's go ahead and talk about few files. So app delegate is your applications delegate, your application wide settings, basically that defines few of the standard functions. For example, what to do when app is launched, or what are the scene configurations that we are looking for. This is where you also basically subscribe or put your logic for your push notifications that are coming from outside, basically from a server. So that's your app delegate, that's your app wide delegate, basically defining different behaviors that your app can follow, basically for the entire app. Then you have something called scene delegate. Scene delegate is basically related to scenes. Now Apple has changed the definition of how apps are basically looked at. So whenever you have an iOS app, you only have one scene which has one of the main view. But if you're working on the iPad or macOS apps, then you have multiple scenes that you can launch on separate windows. Okay, so all the scenes can have their own definition of what to do, how to initialize and stuff like that. And this method right here, where we'll connect to session, this is what we're gonna basically use to create our view controller programmatically. Right now it is not. Out of the box, UIKit project always follows a storyboard design, and we're going to remove the storyboard because what we want to learn is a production level app development. And in order to learn production level app development, many companies, or pretty much all the big companies and tech companies, they don't use storyboard because they come with a lot of baggage. They have a lot of problems, and when multiple teams are working on the project, storyboards can get tricky to resolve for the conflicts, and they're hard to maintain. So for that reason, pretty much all the production level apps have gotten rid of storyboards and they rely on programmatic UI, okay, programmatic creation of the UI, view controller, and everything. And in my opinion, that actually gives you a better learning experience as well. So for that reason, we're going to be following the this entire course by creating each and everything programmatically. Okay, so we're going to basically initialize our view controller here. Right now, our view controller is initialized by the main storyboard, which we're going to delete in a minute. But before we jump onto that, we have this class called view controller, and this view controller is basically your main entry point at this point. Okay, and we're going to see how we can actually change that. And then you have your assets, where your static assets are located. Essentially your files, your colors, your images, like image files, and like several other properties. So you can see the full set by basically clicking on this plus, and let me just do this. Okay, so these are all the things that you can do. For example, you can have image set, color set, symbol set, data set, and you can have different targets basically for iOS, Mac, Watch, and AR extensions and stuff like that. You can create your folders, you can import pretty much all these things in as well. Okay, all right, let me cover the screen so we can see everything properly. Then you have your launch screen. This is the screen that appears basically when your app is launched. So basically you can put your logo and your like app name and stuff like that on this. This is pretty limiting in my opinion. Like, you know, there are only few things you can do. It's not a full-fledged view controller like the way it's presented. But again, like, you know, it gives you a some flexibility towards, like, you know, putting names and stuff. Now this screen does not appear that for that long, so even if you decide to leave it, like, you know, as is, which in our case we're gonna do, that is totally fine. Okay, then you have your info.plist. Now if you go on your info.plist right here, you have, like, you know, info.plist basically located with all the settings, all the things that you need in your info dictionary right here. But any customizations that you make, what's going to happen is they're going to end up right here. Okay, so it's going to have, like, you know, its own copy, and then you're going to have one copy per target. Okay, they're going to be pretty much same, but again, those two exist. All right, with that, we've seen, like, you know, what does our current project as is out of the box contains. Let's go ahead and set a few things up first. So first thing we're going to do is we are going to get rid of the main.storyboard. So go ahead and click delete and just say move to trash. Okay, and now if you build, your project is going to build fine, but if you run, you're going to basically get an error. Okay, and your app is going to crash because basically what's going on is it's looking for the main dot storyboard. Okay, now main is located in, like, you know, it's distributed in several different places, and as you can see, the app is crashing on this main because this main defines the entry point, but this is not where the storyboard is defined. Okay, so the easiest way I would say is go ahead and click Command Shift F and search for main, capital MAIN, and look for it. Okay, so what you're gonna see is you're gonna find basically info.plist. There is a main. This is the name of the storyboard, and this is your local info.plist. Okay, that's where this main was found. So all we're gonna do is click on this minus. Okay, so that's one place it is gone. Now we know that info.plist has the main defined, so we gotta go up into the main info.plist, and then we're gonna look for the entry point. So main storyboard file name. Okay. And we're going to click minus here as well. Okay. All right. So next thing, we are going to basically make sure that we don't have any reference of main on the general tab. Okay. Sign in complication. Okay. Yeah. So let's go ahead and search under build setting. Okay. So I'm going to search for main, and basically what we want to make sure is we don't have, let's select all instead of okay. All right. So we don't see any main reference here. So I think we should be good. So let's go ahead and run it one more time. And we're going to see, like, if we get an error. Okay. So now we got another error and main is still being looked for. Okay. So that means there are more references to main. And I'm going to go ahead and click main and basically try to find. So there we have it. This one is not gone yet. So let's go ahead and remove that. And once we launch, what we should see is a blank screen. It's like, just a black dark screen. No view controller is being launched at this point. If you're thinking this view controller is being launched, let's go ahead and try it out by setting view.background color and set it to orange. So if we set our orange color background, even then our view controller is not showing up. The reason is Xcode does not know where is the entry point. Now, it's easy to define the entry point, and we can do that by going into the scene delegate. Okay. And right here, we're going to basically initialize our view controller. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to basically, instead of ignoring this scene, window scene, we're going to create it. We're going to put it inside a variable. Okay. And then we want to initialize our window. Okay. So we're going to say window, UI window, and UI window takes an overload that takes a window scene as a parameter. So we're going to say we want to pass the window scene that your scene delegate has received from the app delegate when creating this scene. Okay. So now window is created, and once the window is created, we can say window.rootView is equal to the view controller, and we're going to simply initialize the view controller. Now there's one important aspect that we need to do here, and that is make key and visible. That means this window becomes the key window and it becomes visible basically, and this is where we are hosting our view controller. So with that change, let me go ahead and build and run. And now as you can see, our view controller with orange background is shown up. Okay. So this is how you can actually launch your view controller programmatically. Now, one thing we can do is we are going to rename this guy. So let's go ahead and rename this, refactor, rename, and we are going to call this to-do list view controller. Okay, and now our to-do list view controller has been changed, and it's being changed everywhere. Okay, one more thing we want to do is we want to basically wrap this inside a navigation controller. So we can have like, navigation controller, navigation bar and everything. So we are simply going to take this view controller out from there, and we're going to create a UI navigation controller instance, passing the root view as our to-do list view controller. Okay, now with this change, if we launch, what we should see is basically a view controller. Well, navigation view controller is here, but it's just not showing up because it doesn't have a title. So let's go ahead and give it a title. Alright, so we're gonna basically give it a title, and there you have it. Your navigation controller is now showing up fine. And we can change this. So we can change it to UI color dot system background color. So we actually adapt to system background, whatever it is. Now if I change dark mode to light mode, you can see our text view actually adopts the change, and our background adopts that color change as well. Now, by the way, on the simulator, the keyboard shortcut for changing your appearance is Command Shift A. Okay, so I'm going to change it back to dark mode, and with this change, we are ready to move forward and create our view controllers and everything else that we need in order to create this app. Okay, so in the next video, we're gonna get started, but this sets you up basically for the next steps that we're gonna take. All right, so I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you. Hello and welcome back. And in this video, we're gonna be starting off with setting up our project files. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna create a folder structure so we can better organize all of our files. Okay, so I'm going to start by creating a new group, and this group is going to be called system files. Now this is where all the system files will go, essentially your app delegate, your scene delegate, assets, launch screen, and info.plist. Okay, and next group we're going to create is going to be called resources, and this is where we're going to basically store our CoreData files, some of the delegates and data sources that we're going to create, and also CoreData manager. So all the resources that we need basically to create our app. Next, we're going to create a view models. Now this, because this project is CoreData backed, we are going to have a model following the MVVM design pattern, but the model is going to be created by the CoreData. Okay, so we don't need any models folder, so we're going to leave that out, but we're going to create our view controller folder. Okay, which is where our view controllers are gonna go. And last but not the least, we need a folder for all of our views. Now we already have a view controller, and that view controller is our to-do list view controller. So let's go ahead and move it under the view controller. And with all that change and all the folder structure being created, look how clean our project looks. Okay, so we're gonna build, and we're gonna get a build error. We won't be able to build it successfully right now because we made some changes which Xcode doesn't know about. Okay, so Xcode is missing the location of info.plist. So if you look at the error, it's basically trying to process info.plist, but it can't find it. It doesn't know where it is. So the easy fix for this one is, if you go on your project, go on your target and look for info.plist. Okay, let's go ahead and search for info. Let's search for just info, and these are all info.plist values. What we are looking for is the file location, and we should have a file location listed somewhere around here, right here. Okay, so under the packaging, basically what it's looking for is saying, like, there's an info.plist which is located task UIKit /info.plist. Now we know that we have just changed it, so we have introduced another folder in between, and that folder is called system files. So just double click on this guy. Don't expand, just double click. And basically this is an editor. And what we're going to do is we're going to go right before I in the info and enter the name of the folder. So in this case, it's system files. Okay. And we're going to simply press enter after we finish adding our system files. Okay, and now if you build, you should be able to build. Let's go ahead and run to make sure everything is still working fine. And as you can see, our navigation view with the navigation title is showing up just fine. So that means our folder structure is good to go, and all of our files can be found by the Xcode. Okay. All right, so here's what we're gonna do. Now when we have all the folder structure ready, the first thing I want to do is I want to create our model. Okay, and that model is once again defined inside the CoreData. So what we need to do is we need to create our CoreData file with the entity which is going to define the model for this app. Okay, so in the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to create our CoreData model. So I'll see you guys there. Thank you. Hello and welcome back. And in this video, we're going to start by putting together our CoreData model first. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So under resources, we're going to right click and create a new file. And we're going to look for CoreData or data model. And basically, there's only one entry that should show up under CoreData. You should see a data model. What we're going to do is we're going to click next, and this modal is going to pop up basically asking what is the name you want to give your CoreData model, XCData model LD file. Okay, XCData model LD is an extension for the CoreData model. And again, this file is going to contain all your entities, your attributes, in other words, your table columns, its relationships and stuff like that. Okay, so when you create your Xcode project and create CoreData along with it, what Xcode does is to make it convenient, or to make it easy for them to predict what the name should be, they name this as the same name of the project. Now, you can change that name, and when creating your CoreData manager, essentially initializing your persistence container, you can actually tell Xcode what is the name of the file that you want to initialize. So we're going to change the name of this, and we're going to name this file tasks. Okay, so we're going to simply say the file itself is going to be called tasks. Okay, and let's go ahead and create this. Now, as soon as you create the XCData model LD file, you're going to land on this editor. Now, this editor basically has a few things that are going on. For example, you can add your entity. There is no entity right now. You can add a new entity. Okay, entities are basically your tables. Now, once your entities are added, you can add attributes to the entities, and those attributes are basically table names. So let's go ahead and start by creating an entity. And as soon as we click on this add entity button, an entity is added, and just double click on that to basically rename the file. And we're gonna rename the entity as task. Okay, and not tasks, just task, because it represents a single row of record within the entity. So this is the name of your table. Now your table has basically columns, and columns have types. Similarly, on CoreData side, you have your attribute names and their types. So let's go ahead and start creating some attributes. We're going to start with name. So name is going to be basically a string type. All right, and this is basically going to be the name of our task. All right, next one is going to be an ID, to be able to uniquely identify the record, and this is going to be UUID type. Then after that, we're going to create one entry for due on, and this column is going to be of type date. So we're going to store date. When is the task due? That's what this is going to contain. Then we're going to basically create another one called completed on. Completed on, and this is going to be a date type as well. So as soon as the task is marked done, we want to actually store the date on which it was completed, and we're going to store that on under completed on attribute name. Okay, and this is going to be a date type. Last but not the least, we need a flag that is going to show whether the task is completed or not. Okay, and this type is going to be a Boolean type. Now, once we have created this CoreData model and try to build the app, everything should build just fine. And if you go under to-do list view controller, and just for trial, I'm going to import CoreData, and under the view.load, we're going to say task, and we should see basically a task being created. Now this task is exactly the same task that you created just now inside your CoreData, and this task basically is now your data model, okay, or your model for your app. Okay, so this task is going to have basically all the attributes that you have defined: ID, completed, completed on, due on, and name, basically the same columns and or attributes that you added under that table or under that entity. Okay, so with that, our CoreData model is created, and our basically model essentially is created. So next step is to go ahead and start creating our view model, so we can basically start using that view model along with a list view model with the view controller. Okay, so in the next video, we're going to be creating our to-do list view view model, okay, or task view model. Okay, I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you. Hello and welcome back, and in this video we're going to be creating our task view model. So whenever we create our models and we want to expose the data inside the model to the views, we don't directly pass them around. Instead, we actually create view models around it. And the reason for view models to exist is so we can have properties that are related to the views that we need to show inside that view model, and then all the things that basically you have in the model are not directly exposed. So in future, if you are changing your underlying data structure, basically underlying data modeling technique, and moving on from CoreData to something else, or changing your model name or adding new attributes, your entire app doesn't break, and you actually modularize your work this way. Okay, so basically it's a transformation layer or a pass-through layer that you create, but that pass-through layer has a property where it can basically control what view sees, and it can basically go and talk to the model itself, so the model is directly not exposed to the view. Okay, and also for the security reasons, many of the apps, or pretty much all the apps, actually try to hide the underlying data models. So whenever like there's a SQL injection or something related, basically attack happens on the apps side, then your entire data is not exposed, because you have a layer that can include all the security checks, and that layer is view model. Okay, with that little definition of view model and why we need it, let's go ahead and create our file basically for task view model. Okay, so we're going to select a Swift file, and we're going to name this task view model. Okay, and this file is going to be created under view models. Okay, and foundation import is fine. We're going to need only foundation types, nothing else. And we're going to create a struct. Okay, now this struct is going to be called task view model. And you can basically create a class or a struct view model. The view model that directly represents a data model usually is created with a struct, but a view model that is actually exposed in a list or like something similar iterative, then you actually create it as a class or struct. It's up to you. The initialization looks a little bit different, but if you're using combine, you will have to use a class for view model. The reason is that combine uses observable object in order to be able to publish some of the publisher events, and those event streams cannot go out in the struct. They have to be a reference type that can actually conform to those types, not a value type. And struct is the value type, class is your reference type. Okay, all right, so let's go ahead and create a private variable called task. Now this task is going to be passed into the task view model when this view model is created. So we want to actually create that initializer right there, and then we're gonna start exposing properties that we want to expose to our view. Okay, first one is going to be ID, which is going to be UUID type, and we're going to say in this case just pass on the ID, or if ID doesn't exist, then put UUID, a default UID. Well, this is needed because whenever the CoreData creates this model, its model properties are optional types. Okay, even though they can have data, still they are created as optional type, and this basically nil coalescing helps us get away from that optional type. Although this code should never execute, still it is needed. So we can resort to, instead of force unwrapping, we just unwrap using nil coalescing. Next one is name, which is a string type, and we're gonna return task.name here. Again, nil coalescing is gonna be an empty string. Then we have due on, and this is going to be a date type. And as a nil coalescing, we're going to pass today's date. Completed on, which is going to be a date type once again. Task dot completed on. If not, then just initialize a default date, and then you have completed, which is a Boolean type. Now Boolean type is non-optional. Basically it returns whether true or false. When the value is basically nil, then it is returned false by default, so we don't need a nil coalescing for that one. All right, okay, with that, our task view model is ready to be used, and next up we're going to create a task list view model, which is going to basically help us use this task view model. And task list view model is going to be used inside the table view controller over the collection, which is going to show the list of all tasks, and each row is going to be of type task view model. So you will see that our task is not going to be exposed outside of this view model. Next file is going to deal just with the task view model. Okay, so in the next video we're going to create our task list view model. So I'll see you guys there. Thank you. Hello and welcome back, and in this video we're going to be creating our task list view model. Now task list view model is basically going to be used by our UI view controller or UI table view controller, a view controller that's going to host a table view, and basically it's going to be used to list out all the tasks that we have available and stored inside CoreData. Now, TaskList view model is not going to expose our task data model directly, but rather it will expose a task view model that we created in the last video. So let's go ahead and get started by creating a new file, and we're going to select a Swift file template, and we're going to name this TaskList view model. And this view model is going to import from Foundation, which is already included, and we're going to create a class now, and this class is going to be called TaskList view model. Okay, and we're going to create, first thing we're going to create is a tasks variable, which is going to be task view model type, and it's going to be initialized with an empty array. And basically the purpose of this variable is to hold all the values that we are fetching from the CoreData side. And reason we want to keep this value cached, so we don't have to reach out to CoreData if nothing has changed. But also there are, like, some other operations that we can do. For example, we want to know how many number of rows we want to display in our UI table view. Well, we can actually get that number out from this variable rather than reaching out to CoreData. Okay, so like there are a few functions that we're gonna few functions and variables that we're gonna use, which are gonna be backed by this variable, and then there are gonna be other functions that are gonna basically use CoreData to reach out to CoreData and essentially get that information to us. Okay. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to start with the initializer, and this initializer is simply going to call a function getAll. Now getAll is going to get all the records from CoreData. So let's go ahead and create that getAll function, and this function is basically going to populate the task with CoreData value. Okay, so fetch data from CoreData and populate tasks. And we're going to come back to this once we have our CoreData manager ready, and then we're going to basically just add the code that's going to help us fetch that information. Okay, next thing we need is basically our table view is going to need to know how many tasks we are actually displaying, or how many rows we need to display. And this is one of the requirement of table views data source delegate protocol, and we need to fulfill this. So in order to fulfill this, what we're going to do is we're going to use our tasks local variable, and we're going to get the count from that and return that as a number of tasks. So we're going to simply create a variable called number of tasks, which is going to be of an integer type, and it's simply going to return tasks.count. Okay, now right after the getAll, we also need to know because there are two sections that we are displaying. So let me pull up the app. All right, so we have our app running, and there are two sections that we are showing, and we have two different types of cells that we want to display. So first cell actually displays the information about number of tasks that we have in the list, and basically number of to-dos that we need to do, and number of things that we have already done. And this is a separate row than this one. Like they're clearly visible, but like they're also in different sections. So I can show you, like, how you can create different sections within a single table view. So we're going to basically have a function which is going to return number of rows by section. Okay, now for the first section, which is the 0th index section, we're going to have only one row, which is going to simply display the summary of overall tasks that we have in the list. And the second section, which is going to be section indexed 1, it is going to display the number of tasks that are there, like, in total. Okay, so actually not in total, so this one is going to have in total, basically combining completed and non-completed one, and this one is going to be summary, displaying like how many to do and how many completed. All right, so let's go back into our task list view model, and I just realized I think we should rename this as actually task list is okay. All right, so let's go ahead and create our function, and this function is going to be called number of rows by section integer. So we're gonna pass section, and what we expect this function to return is number of rows to be displayed for the table view to render. Okay, so we're gonna say if the section is section count, or the section that's being passed to us is 0, we're gonna return 1. There's going to be only one row that we want to display. Otherwise, we're gonna display number of tasks, which is essentially just the task.count. Now, this row, reason we are not putting else statement, because it doesn't matter, because we are returning our function right from here. So let's say when the section 0 shows up, number of rows, we're going to return 1, and this line will never execute. So we don't need an else statement, although we can put one, and that's quite unnecessary. So in order to save some lines, we're just gonna leave it like that. If this condition doesn't satisfy, then we are anyways returning number of tasks that are in the list. Okay, now once we have our number of rows ready, we want to actually get number of tasks by type. So we want to know how many tasks have been completed and how many are still pending to do, meaning incomplete count. So we're going to basically create a function which is going to return a tuple of completed and incomplete items. Okay, so we're going to simply create a function called get tasks by type, and this guy is going to return a tuple with completed, and actually let's call it complete items and incomplete items. Okay, and what we need to get is basically we need to reach out to our tasks, and we actually want to filter out everything that is already marked completed. So we're gonna simply say completed count, and this is going to be tasks, and we're going to actually use lazy property. So whenever this function, actually this count is needed, at that time these operations are applied. And our Xcode auto complete is pretty smart. In that case, it actually suggests that. So we're gonna leave it at that. We're gonna say task.lazy.filter, and lazy is applied for all high order functions, so you can use it with map, with filter, reduce, or any of those. And they're more memory optimized as well. So what we want to do is we want to actually return all the tasks that are marked completed, and I'm going to copy this guy. Actually, I'm going to copy the whole thing and paste it, and let's change this to incomplete count. Okay, and we just want to change this to not. Okay, and basically what this is saying is return all the tasks that are not marked completed. Okay, and we're going to simply return our completed count and incomplete count. Okay, so this I needs to be small. There you go. All right, so this is our function, which is gonna give us tasks by type. Now this particular function is going to be used by our by our summary cell, which is going to display the summary of total number of records. So this is where this information is going to be shown. Okay, then right after that, we actually need to get a task. Now this is going to be a convenience function because there are going to be several places where we're going to want to know what is the task at this index or at certain index. And instead of basically reaching out to the entire data set and basically getting it out, that is a little bit inefficient. Rather than that, we can actually create a function which takes an index and then gets that information out to us. So we're going to simply create a function called task by index, and this is going to take an integer based index and it's going to return task view model. Okay, and what this guy is going to do is basically just reach out to tasks and get the task at that index, which is stored at that index. Okay, now there are two operations that we're going to do on each row. First operation is going to be toggling the completed state. Whenever a task is completed, we want to toggle that state. And to show you, basically swiping on this cell, we can mark it complete or incomplete. So we can mark it not complete and we can mark it complete. So this is a conditional swipe gesture that we have added. So that's one operation. So let's go ahead and create a function backing that, and we're going to be calling this one toggle completed task view model, and this is going to call CoreData to basically mark or toggle the state of complete. Okay, so call CoreData to toggle completed state. All right, and then we're going to call the get all function because we want to basically refresh our list. Okay, we want to make sure that we have the latest and greatest being fetched from the CoreData. So we want to call get all, and the next operation that we have on our row is on the other side of swipe gesture, swiping right to left, essentially displaying us the delete button. Clicking on this would delete a record. So what we want to do is we want to create a function that is going to support this functionality. So we're going to simply say delete item and the task that is going to be supplied. So task view model, which is going to be expected to be passed in, and we're going to call CoreData to delete the task that is being given and refresh our list by calling get all. Okay, so this is basically our entire task list view model, which we are going to use again with the UI table view to populate our table view with all the data that has been saved inside the CoreData. Okay, all the tasks that have been stored inside the CoreData. All right, with that, we have reached the end of this video, and in the next video we are going to create another view model, and this one is going to be simple. This one is basically to add a new task. So we're going to create add new task view model, which is going to have just one function, being able to add a new task into the CoreData. All right, so I'll see you guys in the next video where we're going to be creating that view model. All right, thank you. Hello and welcome back, and in this video we're going to be creating our add new task view model, which is going to help us with by adding a new task into the CoreData. Alright, this is going to be a very simple view model and a quick video. So we're going to simply create a new file, select Swift file template, and we're going to call this add new task view model. Okay, and once again we're going to create add new task view model, which is going to have just a single function called add task. Now add task is going to take two parameters. One is going to be the name of the task. Second is going to be due on. So due date, we're going to set it to some random date because that's irrelevant when we are creating the task, and we're going to set it to an actual completed, okay, let me back that up a little bit. All right, so due on is going to be the date that is provided by the user. Okay, completed on is going to be the date that we're going to set as a random date, which is going to be only visible when the task is marked as completed. Now when we are marking the task as completed, at that time we're going to update that date whenever the task is marked as completed. Okay, so we don't need basically an input from the user side on when the task is completed because it cannot be created in a completed state. All right, with that said, we only need two things from add task for add task operation in order to add a task into CoreData. One is the name of the task, what we want to do. The other is due on, when the task is due. Okay, and this is not date string, it is actually a date type. All right, and what we want to do with this data is we want to call CoreData and say add new record for task. Okay, all right, so we're gonna call CoreData, and then we're gonna save name and due on, and along with other properties that we're gonna handle inside the CoreData manager, what and how we need to populate that. All right, and this function is, or this view model is going to help us with the creation of adding a new task. All right, with that, like I said, this was going to be a small video, so we are done with this one, and in the next video we are going to start working towards our CoreData manager, which is going to have all the logic for the CoreData initialization, saving, deleting, and marking basically the state completed, or updating a record with a completed state. Okay, so all that coming up in the next video where we're going to be creating our CoreData manager. All right, I'll see you guys there. Thank you.